Great question. My mental health journey started probably when I was, it kind of came to a head when I was at my third year at the University of Minnesota. I was there as a student athlete playing football. So on one hand, I was this football player at this major university, Big Ten school, third largest college in the country, popular guy on campus. And on the other end, I was struggling each evening, crying myself to sleep, having massive headaches. My vision was blurred going through campus. And I dealt with this for several months. And I remember going into the office of my academic advisor, and she kind of sensed something was going on. And I was kind of playing the role, telling her everything was fine academically. I left her office and went into the players' lounge. And I remember opening my books up, and my head just came crashing on my books. And it was like my soul, my spirit, everything.
Welcome to another episode of Strong Place. I'm Io Johnson, Executive Director of Mental Health America of Central Carolinas. And do me a favor and please hit that like and subscribe button. We need all the help we can get with those algorithms, those pesky algorithms, to help more people get this information that is vital to our community. So thank you very much for that. And today I have with me Dr. Tommy Watson, and I'm extremely excited about this conversation we're about to have. Dr. Watson is an award-winning movie writer, producer, and considered a leading expert on turning transitions into success. Dr. Watson has inspired millions with the unique and charismatic way he articulates his rag to riches story. His life of resilience, hard work, and perseverance will inspire any audience. Despite the hardships and a learning disability, his amazing resilience has led him towards academic and professional excellence. He's obtained 4 college degrees, including a Doctor of Education and Leadership with an emphasis on organizational change. And equally impressive is his winning McDonald's Corporation's prestigious leadership award bestowed on top leaders in management. I stumbled over that, folks, but you get the picture. This is an amazing person we have here with us today on Strong Place. Dr. Tommy Watson, welcome.
Who is that guy you described there? I don't know who that guy is.
I mean,
wow. He sounds impressive.
I know, definitely.
To meet him someday.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Long time coming.
Yes.
And we just keep running into each other.
Yes.
It seems like I look up, I could be coming out of a meeting, I'm at Rotary,
Yes.
wherever I look up, you're there.
The minds think alike, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So it was definitely meant for us to be sitting here today and talking about mental health and your amazing journey.
Yes.
And I only read a snippet of your bio because there was so much, and I really want you to share your story. So let's get into it. Tell me your personal mental health journey.
Yeah, great question. My mental health journey started probably when I was what kind of came to a head when I was at my third year at the University of Minnesota. I was there as a student athlete playing football. So on one hand, I was this football player at this major university, Big Ten school, third largest college in the country, popular guy on campus. And on the other end, I was struggling each evening, crying myself to sleep, having massive headaches. My vision was blurred going through campus. And I dealt with this for several months. And I remember going into the office of my academic advisor, and she kind of sensed something was going on. And I was kind of playing the role, telling her everything was fine academically. I left her office and went into the players' lounge. And I remember opening my books up, and my head just came crashing on my books. And it was like my soul, my spirit, everything left me. And I just started crying. And shortly after that, she popped in the door and she said, something is wrong. You got to go see someone. And what happened was a few years earlier, when I got to Minnesota, I thought that everything that I had left in Denver, because I left the environment physically, I had left behind. But all that stuff that I had left was following me. And it had jumped on my back. I never left it. And going back to my Denver story, so I grew up in Denver, Colorado. My mom and dad were drug addicts and shoplifters, and they were arrested 121 times by the time I finished high school. So I have 6 siblings. We have never all lived together, grown up together as kids together. As a matter of fact, I met my oldest brother by pure coincidence in a foster home in 2nd grade. We lived in numerous foster homes, group homes, motel rooms. We were homeless a lot. We were all over the place. And then, with that, in the 80s, when the Crips and Bloods left LA, we had a huge gang problem in our neighborhood in Denver because the Crips and Bloods migrated out to Denver, Colorado as well. So a lot of my friends got swept up in the gang stuff, lost a lot of my friends. Constantly seeing my mom and dad out of prison, going to different schools, suffering from a learning disability, almost being killed in drive-by shootings. There was a lot of stuff going on. So when I physically came to that place my senior year of high school, my mom had just got arrested 44 times. My dad had been arrested 77 times. I lived in almost 30 different locations. My little brother was in juvenile prison. My older brother was on the streets gangbanging. My older sister was on the streets doing crack cocaine. My second older sister was in foster care in Iowa. My younger sister lived with my aunt. And I was an All-American football player. So thank God for that. I received my scholarship to go play football for the University of Minnesota. But I remember getting on the Greyhound bus, leaving Denver 3 days after I graduated from high school because I didn't have anywhere to live in Denver, and crying on the bus, but telling myself no one in Minnesota was going to ever know my story. I got to Minnesota. My goal there was simply to punish people on the football field, go to the NFL, make lots of money, and I was going to be happy. And then my life became unraveled at the end of my third year of college. And that's where my mental health journey really, and the funny thing is we weren't using terms like mental health at the time. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just knew that something was going on because I shouldn't have had to go to sleep crying, being 6'1", 230 pounds, tough guy on the football field, crying myself to sleep at night. And then also just having these massive headaches. So, thank God for that advisor to kind of come in there and say, you know what, something's going on. You need to talk to someone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where a lot of it kind of came to a fold for myself though. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the advisor comes in, says something's going on. You need to talk to someone. What do you do then? Do you go and talk to someone?
Great question. I didn't go to the person she thought I was going to go to. Mm-hmm. She wanted me to go see a therapist. I took a risk and opened up a little bit of my story with one of my teammates. And I was sharing with him a little of my background. And I remember my teammate saying, whoa, he said, God has been looking out for you. And I got really upset with him. I said, hey, man, won't you tell me God has been looking out for me? Because if he had looking out for me, I wouldn't have been in foster homes, group homes, all this other stuff. And then shortly after that, I went back home to Denver. My mom was out of prison, and I was picking her up. She and I were driving my older brother's minivan. We were picking up his girlfriend. I was driving the minivan, and I pulled up in front of the house trying to parallel park the minivan, and my mom is kind of joking with me about how I couldn't parallel park the minivan. And I noticed that at the corner, there was a black Cherokee sitting at the corner. But the Cherokee turned and started coming our way. I'm still trying to parallel park the minivan. And suddenly I started hearing pop, pop, boom, 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 boom. It was gunshots. And with my foot on the brake and the glass starting to break, I leaned towards the middle of the car. And that's when the glass continued to break. And I heard bullets whistling past my head and everything else. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm about to die. And then the gunshot stopped. And I popped up, got the glass off me, looked around to see if I had been shot. Thank God I hadn't been. I looked to my mother. My mother wasn't moving. I started to panic. Then she eventually pops up. Young back pops up. We stumbled from the minivan. The van is shot up from front to back from two shooters. It was a bullet that was lodged in the bottom windowsill of the driver's door that was meant to kill me. In that moment in time, I told myself, hey, there may be something to what he was saying. Maybe God has been keeping me around for a reason. So in doing that, I went back to the University of Minnesota and started to really seek out who Tommy Watson really was. Mm-hmm. Started to volunteer places where I normally wouldn't have volunteered. Started to share my story more with the local news and started writing my book. So one of the biggest therapeutic opportunities that kind of came with that for me was writing my book. Because in writing my book, I had to go relive all those moments, which was very, very difficult. Very, very difficult.
Wow. Mm-hmm. There's lots to unpack there. I'm trying to figure out even where to start. I have so many questions. So you grow up with parents that are habitually incarcerated. Yes. You grow up around a lot of violence, and not just any violence, gun violence.
Yes.
So I can imagine the weight of that on your mental health as a youth, and as a teenager. And even when somebody said, hey, you need to go and talk to someone, you go and you talk to a teammate,
right,
but you don't go and talk to a therapist. Right. So let's get into why. Why do you think I'm not going to see a therapist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in Colorado's first black neighborhood, which is called 5 Points. And at the time, growing up there, so Pam Greer's from my neighborhood, Don Cheadle's from my neighborhood, Bill Beatty from Earth, Wind & Fire's from my neighborhood.
Good stock.
And Robert Smith, the billionaire, is actually from my neighborhood as well, but they grew up on the other side.
Right.
So by the time I was growing up in 5 Points, we were very, very poor economically. So many of us didn't have access to counselors and therapists and things like that. And I also mentioned the fact that I also grew up homeless. So a lot of people try to usually equate homelessness with poverty, two different things. So, for example, when I was in 7th grade, we got kicked out of our house in front of all of our friends, and the neighbors came and took all of our stuff. From there, my family of 9 of us moved into our 7th motel room where we stayed my entire grade year of school. Now, my friends at the time who lived in the projects, not to minimize their situation in poverty, but because they were in the projects, they were getting government help.
Right.
They received a lot of government assistance. There was 9 of us in one motel room. We didn't receive any government assistance at all because it wasn't our address. So we were off the radar screen. So we were visibly invisible. So we didn't have resources that the other folks in poverty had because we were constantly scraping and trying to survive and just trying to live a new day. So we never really had access to the therapists and all the other things like that. So, and we never talked about it. We never talked about our problems. Even when we were getting taken away from our parents and placed in foster care, by the time we looped back to my parents a few years later, there was no discussion about what happened, what took place, what's going to happen now. It was business as usual. We continued to go on. You know, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and my aunt living with them. There was no conversations about, hey, you know, sorry your mom and dad went to prison. Here's what we're going to be doing. It was a matter of just life goes on. Here's how we keep moving. So my family was always in a situation where life had to keep moving. We never talked about anything. We never discussed it. We never sought out outside interventions. We just simply just moved and kept going. That was the norm.
Wow. And I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And you said something so key that I never really thought about. Homelessness, or being unhoused, as we call it now, and poverty not being the same thing. Because we were also habitually unhoused, like moving from place to place, as my mom was figuring things out. But we weren't poor. Very interesting, dynamic to think about it, and for us to really think as a community that the two are not synonymous. My mom, now when I was born, my mom was on welfare. She had to choose between who was going to eat, me or her.
Right.
And that was her only child at that time. At that time, we were poor, but by the time my brother and sister got here, we weren't poor. My mom was just having a hard time, I think, figuring it out sometimes, and also just doing it by herself with not a lot of support. I remember us living with a family friend. I called her my aunt. You have your mom's friends, you call them aunts and stuff, and their kids are your cousins. And we were, she had let us come and stay with her. We were living in one of my cousin's rooms, me, my brother, my sister, my mom, and we, the 3 of us would sleep on the floor. And my brother, he was a baby, he would sleep in the bed, or my sister. But I just remember those types of moments shaping us and feeling basically we're unhoused. Like we're living somewhere, we have a roof over our head, but we're basically unhoused. We're a family of 4 sleeping in this, 1-bedroom apartment of a friend of my mom's. And just trying to figure it out. The other thing I remember also about moving a lot and always being in rentals is that they didn't let you paint the walls back. Now, and you go and rent an apartment, they let you paint the walls, you just got to paint them back.
Right.
But back then, they did not let you. And so I just remember thinking, when I get older, I want to be able to paint my walls.
Yes.
I don't want to be in a place with white walls.
Yes.
I want to be able to paint them. So we were having housing challenges. We weren't necessarily poor. Like you said, we didn't have government assistance. My mom made too much. We just didn't have those resources. I remember telling me once that she tried to lie on her, the free lunch application at school. So we, because it was 3 of us, so we could get free lunch. She was like, if I tell them how much I make, they're not going to get it. But she was trying to do all of this, alone. And so I love that point that you brought up, that they're not synonymous.
They're really not.
Sometimes you are not living in poverty, but you don't have a place to call home.
Absolutely. Another example of that was in 2nd grade, we were living in a motel room. I remember we came home after one day of being out, and we were approaching the motel room. My dad went to put the key in the door, and the door wouldn't open up. And like, what's going on? We turn around, the owner's behind us. My dad's like, hey, we can't get into the room. And the guy was like, "You're not getting into the room." He says, "You haven't paid rent. You're not getting into the room." And then him and my dad went back and forth for a moment. But in that moment, he finally tells my dad, he said, "Get out of here before I call the police." And in that moment, as little kids and as a family, we had to walk away from that motel room knowing everything we owned was behind that door and get back into the car and go down the street to the next motel room like nothing ever happened. There was no one we could call to say, "Hey, this motel owner is taking our stuff." We literally had to walk away from that room. Everything we owned was in there. We had to go down to the next motel down the street and start life all over again like nothing ever happened. So when you're dealing with homelessness, you don't even have the basic tenant rights as the regular renter who may be dealing with poverty or what have you. Those
Right.
they're really, really two different worlds. And even the interventions that we started looking at solutions to help the homeless people, they're going to be totally different than what it is for a person in poverty.
Right.
Again, my friends who lived in the projects, tough circumstances for them, but they were there for 3 generations.
Right.
They were getting government help,
Right.
government cheese. They were getting all those different things. Though, and my mom and dad were boosters, so they didn't have regular jobs. So they were shoplifters. That's what they did for a living. They would go out and hustle from sun up to sundown. We wouldn't eat most days. Most of our meals were only coming from school, and it was a tough world to live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And another guest, so we were talking about how economic disparity affects your mental health. And people don't really think about it. They just think of, poverty or being unhoused as one thing and mental health as being something else. And they are so closely connected. Have you ever thought about what your experiences as a child and as a young adult, you started getting the headaches when you're in college. Did you make the connection or was it until later in life?
It was later. I never made the connection. I never paused to think about my circumstances. I remember there was one time I paused. My senior year of high school, the movie Boys in the Hood came out. And my basketball coach gave me and my best friend tickets to go see the movie. My best friend was the only person who knew my circumstances at the time. And he and I went to go see this movie. And we were looking at this movie, Boys in the Hood. I see the character Ricky, football player. He's trying to get out of the hood to go to college.
Yep.
His brother's involved in gangs.
Yeah.
He's got everything riding on this scholarship. And he ends up getting killed at the end of the movie. And my friend and I looked at each other. He said, "T, that's your story." And we started crying in the movie theater. And I was like, whoa, I got to get out of here. And I remember just my senior year of high school, I'm like, I got it. My mom had just went back to prison. My little brother, my dad went back to prison. Older brother had just gone back to prison. I just got almost killed in a drive-by shooting a year prior to. And I remember just thinking to myself, I got to get out of here. I can't get out of here. I got to get out of here. And I didn't take time to think about how bad the situation was. Because I always felt if I thought about the situation too much, it would literally drive me crazy because there was so much going on in life. So one of the things I would do to soothe myself during these moments was I listened to slow music. So even it was funny, even in college, my teammates would make fun of me because I was the one guy on the team. We go into Michigan and play against Tom Brady and all these teams. I would be listening to slow jams and they're all listening to all this hype up music. But I would go out on the field and be like a beast on the football field. They were like, "Man, how does slow jams get you to be like that?"
Right.
I was like, the slow jams are slowing me down from being wave and worse than that, So the slow jams were things that I learned how to use to soothe my soul from a very young age. And I didn't know that I was necessarily doing that. I know that I just got a lot of peace and solace whenever I heard certain beats and certain tempos. It made me relax. It made me zone out. It made me think about a world that I was not in. And, also struggled with reading. So I had dyslexia. But I remember looking at picture books and I would see the kid in the picture book who was sitting under the tree, legs crossed with an apple. And I was just saying to myself, I want that life someday. I want to just live in peace like that. I don't care about the house or money, but I do want that level of peace. So connecting those pieces and the music gave me solace, but I didn't necessarily tie it back to mental health. I was just doing certain things that I could do to get me on to the next day. Yeah.
Wow. So how do you get from there to having some significant challenges in that third year of college to having 4 college degrees, a doctorate, becoming an author, winning corporate awards. What was the shift for you? What was the tipping point, as Malcolm Gladwell would say?
Yeah, absolutely. So after the drive-by shooting, I went back and I started getting involved in an organization called Athletes in Action, which was a Christian-based organization there. And it really gave me a chance to really kind of tap into my spiritual life and understand that a lot of the stuff that I had been going through in life, there was purpose behind it. And I had to release a lot of the pain and anger that I had towards my parents. I had to really forgive them. And in forgiving my parents, I began to kind of embrace the fact that I'd gone through these things for a reason. And the first time I told my story publicly, I remember the University of Minnesota, we were scheduled to play a game against Iowa over Thanksgiving weekend, which was rare because we had to stay in town. I was staying in town anyhow, but most of the players, they were staying in town as well. And I remember suggesting that we go to this women's shelter in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to kind of give back. And one of the guys knew my story. He said, hey, you should probably tell your story to the women there. And I was like, man, I don't know about that. My teammates had never heard my story, So I remember getting the courage to stand up before my teammates and share my story. I was shaking. And I remember one of the ladies came up to me afterwards. She said, thank you for sharing that, young brother. I remember that. And then I decided to share my story with the local news reporters in Minneapolis. And I shared my story. It aired the Friday night after one of our games. And I remember I was getting ready to go out to the nightclub. I was headed to the club, and I was downtown Minneapolis. The show had aired, and I was walking, and there was a guy walking towards me, and he kept looking at me, and I was starting to get nervous, like, oh shit, should I brace myself to, something will jump off here? And he gets closer to me. He says, you were the guy on the news. Thank you for telling your story. And he started crying, and he embraced me. And I'm downtown Minneapolis, getting ready to go to the club.
Right.
And now I find myself
moment.
right. And me and him sat there for about an hour crying and just consoling each other. I never made it to the nightclub that night. And these were all these small moments that were coming saying, hey, you know what? God has been using the story and the path, that way that you've gone through, to now position you to be able to use that to help other people. And the more and more I began to embrace that, I did the book, and then I did the movie and some other things. So that was the journey, but it all started with the spiritual component, knowing that there was more to my story, and that journey that I'd gone on, as painful as it was, there was purpose in it as well. But it took coming to that moment of almost losing my life, the rediscovering, forgiving my parents and everything else to be able to move forward though. Yeah.
And I want to get into that, to that forgiveness, but is that moment when that man hugged you on the street on your way to the club, is that the moment that you realize there's something different about you, and that God didn't have you on the path of ordinary?
I don't know that it was something different about me, but there was something to the story. It wasn't so much about Tommy Watson as much as it was to the story that Tommy Watson had lived. And I was thinking to myself, the story in itself is doing something to inspire people, to change people, to touch people. Didn't quite know what it was, but I had to keep telling the story. I had to keep moving forward. And in doing so, I was continued to be thrusted into a world of more and more people. And then once I wrote the book, that's where it became more personal.
Which book was this?
A Face of Courage, the first book I wrote. So that was where I actually had to write my story and told my story. It took me about a year-long process. And when you write a book about something like this, the characters aren't there to write their portion. So I had to become my dad, the guy who was abusive towards my mom. I had to become my mother. I had to get research on my mother and dad, my mother and father. That's how I know they were arrested 121 times, because I had to really get their background records and had to delve into their own personal stories. My dad, not to relinquish him from his responsibilities as a father, but learning more about his story. He didn't have a father growing up. My mother was in foster care, was molested and all this stuff growing up as kids. So we talk about generation of poverty, of trauma.
Yeah.
And even my grandmother, she didn't know her father, so you just generation after generation after generation of just nonstop trauma. And my goal at the time was to get as much education as I could, because I knew I had a teacher in high school who told me that education was the one thing no one could never take away from me, but also education was opening up doors for me. And I became a student of becoming a lifelong learner. I like learning about other people's stories. I like learning about my own story, but in doing so, that's where I began to make the connection between the story and Tommy Watson when I wrote the story, wrote the book about myself.
And I'm glad that you said that because I asked you, was it at that moment that you realized that you were different and that there was something special about you? And you said, not about Tommy Watson, but about my story. But I want to lean into that because there is something special about you. Have you come to that conclusion yet?
I still have not. I think there's something different about me. I don't think there's anything special about me. 'Cause I think what I was able to do.
I'm using special and different as synonyms.
Okay, I say different though.
Okay.
Yeah, not special. I think there's definitely something different. And the funny thing was, I never knew the difference until I started hearing my teammates' stories. So, for example, when I was in college at the University of Minnesota, during breaks and vacations, my friends who lived in Houston, because a lot of us were going our way to TCU in Texas, but we chose Minnesota because the coach left there. They would go back home for breaks and vacations. Their families would do barbecues for them. They would be celebrated. And the funny thing is, when the breaks would come around, they would be headed to the airport. I would be headed to the bus station, the Greyhound bus station, headed back to Denver. And they would laugh. But what they didn't know was I didn't have anywhere to stay when I went back to Denver for breaks and vacations. So it took me 22 hours to get from Minneapolis to Denver, going back home, which meant that I had at least 2 days to sleep somewhere. So I would sleep on the bus. I get back to to Denver, find someone to stay with. But it also meant that I could leave Denver at any point in time whenever my housing situation ran out of luck, and I can go back to Minneapolis and stay with someone else until the dorms opened up. I never moved out of the dorms during the 5 years I was at the University of Minnesota. My teammates would laugh about that. But the stability that I stayed in the dorms, that I had in the dorms, was the most stable time of my life.
Right.
So I started to learn the differences when I started to hear about their stories and how they were going back and being embraced home, and I was going back trying to in survival mode. And I recently wrote an article about how during the month of March, which is spring break for a lot of kids, March is madness for homeless kids. Because many times we see breaks and vacations and everybody gets excited. Hey, kids go home. But if you don't have a home to go to, that becomes a scary, scary moment when school's let out for summer breaks, for winter breaks, because it's like, now where's the stability going to come from? Where are the social connections going to come from? Where's the food going to come from? That doesn't become a celebratory event for a lot of kids who are dealing with homelessness. So every time a break came along, I was in panic mode because I didn't know who I was going to stay with when I got home to Denver.
Yeah.
And it was just total chaos. And literally the Greyhound bus, I would listen to my slow jams on the Greyhound bus, and I would just try to get my mind right to try to figure out where I was going to stay at, but also knew that I could always go back to Greyhound and then go back to Minneapolis and then stay in the dorm. So that's when I started learning the differences and how a lot of people weren't really living in the same place that I was living.
Right.
Or experiencing the same things.
Yeah. The other day, you had texted me a link to an interview that you did recently, and I had shared with you that I have a passion for housing also. Tell me about this space, because what I do realize is that a lot of times our purpose is birthed out of our pain.
Yes.
And you have one of your purposes is housing. So tell me about the work that you're doing with that and how it connects to your own childhood.
Absolutely. So I'm in the process now of working on so we did the short film. The short film has won 8 awards about my story. Now we're doing a feature film, which is going to showcase what it's like being a kid growing up in America dealing with homelessness, which last year impacted 4.2 million kids in our country. It's a big deal. And 6,000 kids here in Charlotte. And the reason I'm so passionate about this, because again, I don't know that a lot of people understand the distinction between the two. So if we're going to help people and kids, and in particular kids and youth who are dealing with these situations, we got to know and understand it, because the interventions need to be applicable to what they're dealing with. So I'm on a mission to do that. But the other thing is that we're going to do, once the movie comes out, we're going to also try to influence policy. And one of the things that happens with policy in Florida is a place where if you're a kid who's experienced homelessness during your high school career, you're eligible to go to a state college for free. That's the way you break the cycle of homelessness and poverty for a lot of kids. I would love to see the same thing happen here in North Carolina, my home state of Denver, Colorado, Minnesota, where I went to school at, and across the nation, where we begin to give those kids, because again, you have poverty,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have people who are dealing with homelessness.
Right.
They're it's almost below homeless. I mean, below poverty. So
Right.
giving these kids a break, a chance to really break the cycle through education and training beyond high school is the way that you give them opportunities to open up doors to change their lives and for them to go back and change the lives of other people. So I'm using that example and I'm embracing that through my movie, through the other ways I'm doing it, to share my story. And that's what I'm on a mission to do for the rest of my life, to encourage people, and in particular, kids. Think about it. Kids don't ask to be born into those situations.
Right.
Youth don't ask to be born into those situations.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a principal in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I had the largest number of homeless kids in the district coming to my school. And I made it a purpose to make sure I was eating with those kids every month, let them know that their principal was at the same place. I was sending school buses an hour away to grab kids, to make sure that that school was the most stable place in their lives, because it meant a lot to those kids in the midst of all the transitions that they couldn't control, that at least the schoolhouse was the same thing every day, greeted them the same way. And that meant a lot to me in doing that. So I think, we got to continue to make sure we're getting those messages out to society, letting them know the differences between poverty and homelessness. Both are horrible.
Right.
But again, when you are dealing with homeless, you are visibly invisible. So to the world, you look the same outside.
Yeah.
Until they go to where you live at or where you don't live.
Where you don't.
That's where the differences takes place. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned that you were a principal in Minnesota. How did you end up in Charlotte?
You know what? My last year in Minnesota, we had 53 days below zero. I remember going into McDonald's, and an older guy was like, "Son, get out of here." And I was like, "Great advice. You getting out of here." I always heard about the Carolinas, and Charlotte was a great place on radar screen. So I packed up and we were down here 13 years ago. Yeah.
Amen. Amen in that. I'm born and raised in New York. Spent most of my adult life in New Jersey. I think we had like one winter. We had something like back-to-back blizzards. I was like, I'm out.
Right.
I cannot do this
That's right.
anymore.
Yeah.
I need warm Christmas. I want to wear shorts and have a Christmas tree up. That's me. I'm okay with it. I don't need snow Christmas.
I don't need any more snow either. So
Right.
no more snow.
Right.
Yeah.
My son lives in Michigan. I keep telling him, can you please get out the frozen
Right.
tundra? But he won't leave. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming. I feel like this is 4 episodes. There's so many different things that I want to talk about. So many different things I want to talk about. But I just really appreciate you sharing this story of resilience. Tell us a little bit more about is it a documentary that's becoming a movie, or is it like a series? It's
just going to be a feature film. This will be a feature film, very
right.
similar to Boys in the Hood and Pursuit of Happiness and The Blind Side. It's going to be a combination of those 3 movies.
Wow.
And it's going to be a narrative that's going to be, we got the support of the NFL and the Denver Broncos. So we're raising money for it now. And, we're looking forward to being in the theaters, and then there'll be some of the streaming networks afterwards. One of the messages I really want people to really get from this, though, because you asked what kind of helped me through a lot of that. I was always dreaming beyond my circumstances. So my goal to go to the NFL gave me a chance to continue to dream, because in 3rd grade, when the gangs migrated to Denver, I was at another crossroads, because I had been in numerous foster homes and motel rooms at this particular time, and I was living with my aunt. And the gangs looked very, very appealing. And she got me involved in sports. And that sports opportunity gave me a chance to begin to dream about the NBA and the NFL, which gave me a chance to constantly dream beyond the chaos that was around me. So even one of my toughest days, when I was going through hell, I still had a dream to go to the NFL. And in doing so, it kept me on track, because what's happening right now in our society with our boys, in particular, our black boys, when a kid comes and tells most adults that they want to go to the NFL or NBA, the response they hear is, better have a plan B. That may not happen. Chances are slim. But what you're doing when that happens is, because for the boys, their ideas of success are either the guys that they see on the corner doing whatever it may be, and they'll see the sports figures on TV. So if you tell them they can't have this over here, or the football dream, they're gravitating toward this other thing over here. And that's what's happened to a lot of our boys in society. So what I tell a lot of adults is that when a kid says they come to you and tell you they want to go to the NFL, you should be saying, great. Did you know that there's never, ever, ever been an NFL player who's going to the NFL who hasn't gone to college for 3 years? So the pathway to the NFL has to go through higher education. And I didn't make it to the
Love
NFL.
that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't make it to the NFL, but I got to higher education though. So if the goal is, if every kid who wants to go to the NFL simply graduates high school, good citizen, good grades, decent kid, that's a win for us. That's a win for us because again, they're shooting for something higher than the circumstances. So we got to allow our kids to dream beyond the circumstances, male and females, no matter what the situation may be. So I want folks to dream beyond the circumstances, and hopefully this movie is going to be a product to kind of help you begin to see that the importance of that.
Excellent. Like I said, I feel like this is like 4 more episodes, so many other things that we could talk about. But I would love for you to just share with our audience how they can dig deep and find that resilience that's within them, like deep inside of them.
You know, one of the things I want people to walk away with is the power of hope. Hope is one of the most important words in our vocabulary. And when you have hope, the acronym I'm using for hope is have only positive expectations. Because when you're going through tough times and when you believe that in the end you're going to win, you're going to win. But when you go into a situation and you don't believe that things can work out for you, life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So whatever you believe is going to happen, it's going to happen. What you speak in life is going to meet you down the corner and around the corner later on. So I want people to really know and understand that in order to be resilient, it's something that you have to do inch by inch, which is a phrase one of my teachers used to use all the time. She said, inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it gets hard. So take every day, inch by inch by inch by inch, taking small steps. The small wins turn into bigger wins. Don't discount the small wins. Give yourself credit for it. Celebrate the small wins. And as you go through life, be cognizant of your circle. There are going to be people around you who aren't looking out for your best interests. Sometimes that's going to mean you're going to need to roll solo. You got to be okay with that. You and the man upstairs. But whatever the case may be, you got to find your circle of friends, people who believe in you, speak life into you. You got to keep going, know what your values are, affirm yourself every day, and have a vision for your future. And that all starts with the word hope, having only positive expectations. So with that, you can be resilient at anything you do. And I look forward to connecting with you on this journey as well.
Wow. So many gems that you dropped right there. Also, tell the audience where they can find you on social media, if they want your website, anything where they can follow your journey.
Okay, yeah. You can follow me at www.tawatson.com or any social media, Dr. Tommy Watson, any of those social media. Reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you. But again, I'm using my story to impact the lives of others, but I want to let folks out there know you have a story as well. Your story is meant to be told because even the things that you've gotten over right now, there's someone currently going through those things. They need to hear your story. So don't be afraid to tell your story. Don't be embarrassed to tell your story. Don't let people shame you and not telling your story.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for just gracing the set of Strong Place. I was really inspired by our conversation today. And thank you for joining us on another episode of Strong Place. I'm Io Johnson, Executive Director of Mental Health America of Central Carolinas. Don't forget to please hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time.